So I had the pleasure of watching Cenk Uygur in the Jubilee talks, and I must say, some of these people are really deluded when it comes to our current situation in politics. For example, one of them was saying, hey, Joe Manchin was making it really hard for Joe Biden to get his agenda through. And Cenk correctly pointed out, do you think Donald Trump would allow a senator from his own party to dictate his agenda? We just saw one of the biggest cuts in Medicaid in the big beautiful bill. Donald Trump forced his party to swallow that even though they didn't want to. And then the guy says to Cenk, well, do you want us to act like Donald Trump and bully our fellow senators? And I was like, hey, buddy, do you realize that the president has to make calls to kill people, right? So you don't want him to bully the people in his party who are holding back his agenda? Do you think that flies with Donald Trump? Of course not. If you're against his agenda, he's going to put maximum pressure on you. So if I was Joe Biden and I was seeing that Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin were holding up my agenda, I would literally bring out a readout and say, this person takes this much money from the fossil fuel industry, this person takes this much money from the pharmaceutical lobby. They're against you, the American people, and they're holding up my infrastructure plan. Make sure you call their office and let them know how unhappy you are. But that's the thing about Democrats. They don't actually push for their agenda. And I agree with Cenk. They don't want things like a public option for healthcare. They don't want to raise the minimum wage. They're always going to find a way to weasel out of it. And one of them brought up a good point saying that, hey, federal workers were making $15 minimum wage and then Donald Trump used an executive order and stopped that practice. Well, if Joe Biden actually did what he said and actually passed a $15 minimum wage through legislation, you can't just undo that through executive orders, now can you? So that person making the point like, hey, there are real differences. Not really, because the next administration can come in and undo all of this if it's a Republican administration. This is what annoys me about the Democrats. They don't fight. And I think it's like the Washington General situation. They don't want to fight. And then someone brings up like, oh, are you saying that all the Democratic senators are corrupt? Yeah, most of them. They vote based on whoever signs their paychecks. That's why there will never be a public option for healthcare. At least the Republicans are somewhat consistent, saying we just believe in free markets and we think the healthcare industry should just be completely private. Nothing to see here. And if we're going to debate people are happy with their healthcare plans, why are people celebrating people like Luigi Mangione? Now, I would never celebrate Luigi Mangione. Doesn't mean I had to feel sorry for the person he allegedly unalived. We actually want Democrats to, I don't know, stand for something. Imagine if we had a Democrat in office who took the same mentality as Donald Trump, meaning that if you're going to oppose my agenda, I'm going to do everything within my power to destroy you politically. And this doesn't necessarily try to use carrots and sticks. You can offer a carrot saying, hey, if your state can't afford the public option, we're going to subsidize that with the federal government. And then if you're still against it and I see you take millions of dollars from the healthcare industry, yeah, I'm going to do everything within my power to let the American people know why you're really against a public option for healthcare. Which is sad because then most of these people would just end up not running for re-election. They'd just make sure to screw us over on the way out. But similar to what Jesse Ventura said about Democrats and Republicans, it's like a WWE game. In front of the cameras, we hate each other, but in the background, we're actually best friends, making sure we get our subsidies for the oil and gas industry and whatever industry we're bought out by. We don't care about the American people. Could we maybe get public financing for elections one day? Probably not, because a lot of these a-holes will leave with cushy jobs and lobbyist money. Isn't it ironic you're against giving healthcare to people when our senators and congressmen have their healthcare subsidized by the taxpayer? So at the end of the day, yeah, fuck these people. There were points in the talk where I did agree with the people talking to Cenk more than Cenk. I mean, one of them correctly pointed out, like saying, you love unions so much. And then when they tried to unionize, you were against it. Do as I say, not as I do. Cenk got really defensive over it. It was kind of funny. And one of them also pointed out to Cenk, like, hey, some of these infrastructure bills, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, these are major political legislations that were passed under the Biden administration. It's not nothing. So there is a difference between Republicans and Democrats, but the major changes that the Democratic base wants has no interest in doing any of these things. That's why they're historically unpopular. And I do think it'll be rather funny if the Democrats end up not retaking the House of Representatives just because the Republicans decided to gerrymander the state of Texas. Both parties gerrymander, by the way. Maryland, Illinois, New York. The only difference is the Republicans are just so blatant about it. But overall, I actually enjoyed this talk with Cenk.
And if you made it this far, you are awesome. Do me a solid. Hit like and please consider subscribing. And if you disagree with me, that's just fine. Have a good day.